award-winning screenwriter, filmmaker and author. His films have screened at numerous film festivals including Cannes, Toronto, Berlin, Locarno, London and New York. He has won or been selected as a finalist in the New Zealand Film and TV Awards in the categories of Best Screenplay Feature Film, Best Screenplay TV Drama, Best Screenplay Short Film, Best Screenplay TV Comedy, and Best Screenplay Documentary, Best Directed TV Drama, and Best Directed TV Non-Drama. And he's also an author. He's an author of In Dark Places, which is the Teina Pora story, and he's also just penned a graphic novel, which name is on a different page.
Helen and the Go-Go Ninjas.
Helen and the Go-Go Ninjas, thank you. And I think Michael is going to read to us from In Dark Places today. Thank you.
Kia ora whānau, tēnei te mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you, Kirsten. And I'm just so delighted that there's like 3 times as many audience as authors. That's fantastic. So I'm going to be a bit contrary and read the end of the book. So major spoiler alerts, but there you go. Just give you some context for those who don't know about Teina Pora's story. So Teina was a young 17-year-old Māori boy in South Auckland who came into the sphere of the police to do with a 1-year-old cold case. Susan Biddy had been murdered a year previous. And Teina, for various reasons, began a process of making a false confession that was assisted mightily by the 2 most senior detectives in South Auckland. His false confession was so utterly clearly false, and nonetheless it stood up in court and he went to prison for 21 years. An extraordinary man, Teina's an extraordinary man. He survived 21 years in prison and came out still full of hope and humanity. But another extraordinary man, Tim McKinnell, was an ex-detective, now private detective, who found Teina's case and won his freedom. I became involved through Tim in telling Teina's story through a documentary, through this book, and ultimately through a film, a dramatic film. So Teina's case was finally, because of Tim and his legal team, finally went to the Privy Council, and this that I'm going to read to you is the night that the Privy Council decision came out. Teina and his family came to our house, and Tim and his family and the lawyers came to our house, and this is the night of the decision. The house where JK, who is the lawyer, stays in Auckland overlooks the inner harbour. Tim, Ingrid, JK and Teina are at a table and chairs on the balcony. The tide is in tonight. It's a still night. The moon is out. A big stand of native trees lines the water edge below. Across the harbour, the bright pink buildings of the Chelsea Sugar Works. With really good news or really bad news, there's no right or wrong way to say it. You just need to get it out, get it over with, then you deal with the consequences. Tim takes a deep breath. We've got some news for you, Teina. All your convictions have been quashed. Teina stays quiet for a long time, disbelief in his face. The lawyers and Tim are all crying. Teina is trying very hard not to. Sometimes you dream of a moment for years, sometimes a lifetime. Most times the moment never comes, sometimes it does. Watching Teina, Tim can see the news sink in. Disbelief slowly shifts to understanding. For a long moment, Teina stares off across the harbour. At the hills of Birkenhead on the northern shore, 20 kilometres beyond, the barbed wire fences of Pāremoremo prison where he had spent 21 years. Teina says, I always knew this day would come. There's a few minutes of joy, tears, a lot of tears. But 10 o'clock is approaching, the time when the announcement is going to happen. They have to get back to the gathering to be there for the broadcast. Teina hasn't said much. He doesn't need to. The relief, the weight off his shoulders, the ecstasy is written all over him. But now the news has started to settle, now Teina's had time to think. There are some people he's concerned about. Teina asks, what about the kids of the detectives who arrested me? Tim has pictured and prepared for quite a few possibilities of how tonight might play out, how Teina might take the biggest news of his life. This wasn't one of them. Teina continues, the detectives, with this decision they might be criticised, right? He's worried about those kids. He doesn't want them to feel bad if their fathers are accused of sending an innocent man to jail. Tim, Ingrid and JK look at each other. A man who has spent more than 21 years in prison. The convictions that put him there have just been thrown out by the highest court in the Commonwealth. A man deemed innocent, a man who the Privy Council has declared should never have been convicted in the first place. And his first thoughts are for the children of the detectives who arrested him. Back at the gathering, Teina is very aware that he can't let anyone know the outcome before it's broadcast. He comes in with his best poker face, his sunnies on. He does a bloody good job of keeping the news quiet, maybe a little too good. Seeing Teina's hangdog expression, Michael's heart plummets. Oh shit, no, surely not. Then the announcement. I'm just skipping forward a little bit. It's later. The announcement has been made, everyone's had a few drinks. Teina doesn't really use the word prison, he calls it that place. In the backyard, Teina is at last unwinding, relaxing. Finally his sunglasses have come off. Teina sits and talks quietly. Crowds aren't his thing, centre of the spotlight, that's not him. But with people he knows and trusts, with those who are dear to him, he opens up. Chanel, his daughter, wants to get going. There's work tomorrow, but Teina is nearly ready to go. He just wants a few more minutes, finish his beer. As his daughter gets his grandson ready to leave, Teina takes a last sip of his beer. He turns to the friend he's sitting with. Teina says, when I was in that place, I only had half a heart. Chanel only had half a heart. Now we have a whole heart, and nothing's ever going to change that. Teina finishes his beer. Above, a million stars shine. It's late. Time to go home.
So you're probably the most famous New Zealander I've met. And the only person I know who's had a film appear at the Cannes Film Festival. Your Ngaio Marsh award-winning book, In Dark Places, was also made into a TVNZ film. And your latest work is a time travel action graphic novel, Helen and the Go-Go Ninjas, created with Ansing. I guess asking you which piece of your work is the favourite is a bit like asking a parent to name their favourite child. But do you have a favourite and why?
Yeah, in a funny kind of way, I feel like my whole career was really getting me ready to do this work. I don't think I'm going to do anything nearly as important in my life. The fact that I was able to sort of bring a bunch of skills that I've developed over a couple of decades to the really important job of, first of all, because when I started on this, Teina was still in prison. There was the very real possibility that he would never be acquitted. It's very, very, very hard to overturn a miscarriage of justice, despite the massive amount of evidence that Tim McKinnell had accumulated. The cops, as is all the police here, but as is the police way, they had circled their wagons and they refused to concede there was anything wrong with the appalling set of interviews that put the Teina in prison 2 decades before. The cops and the Solicitor General fought it the whole way and fought it all the way to Privy Council, whereas it should have just been cut off. He should have been given a governmental pardon. So it was quite possible that Teina was not going to be exonerated. So through Tim's extraordinary work and through him reaching out to a bunch of people, including a few really key journalists like Paula Penfold and Eugene Bingham, and reaching out to me as a filmmaker, gathered a bunch of people around who fought like hell with him. He covered what he does so brilliantly, and we did what we could. And I don't think there will ever be anything more important that I'll work on in my life.
Thank you. In your Radio New Zealand interview, after you won the New Zealand Film Commission's Te Aupounamu Māori Screen Excellence Award, it's clear how much Teina's case changed you as a person, and I assume as a writer. How has the direction of your career changed at all since in dark places?
So it's funny, like, there was a time when immediately after that I did get a lot of approaches from people who may or may not have suffered miscarriages of justice. I made a conscious, New Zealanders and I got calls from some American prisoners, and I made a really conscious decision that, you know, there was so much of our life, because my family had been very close to Teina, we used to go and visit him in prison, had been devoted to this, and against the odds, the right outcome happened. I made a conscious decision that I wasn't going to become the miscarriage of justice storyteller. But what it did do very definitely was, Teina, as a young Māori man, became to me in a way the poster boy of where we are, you know, 200 years after colonisation. Māori make up 14% of society, they make up 53%, we make up 53% of prison cells. You know, we do a lot of things really right in this country, but there's a lot of things that we don't do right. And there's still institutional racism in most of our institutions. And, you know, the justice system is the most visible tip of the iceberg, but there's a lot more iceberg underneath. So I guess for me, what this did was to enunciate, I think, what my storytelling now is very, very focused on. For instance, I was really trying to work out how I was going to do this to make it fit seamlessly in here, Kirsten. But Monday night, 8:30 on TV1, on TV2, there's a crime thriller series that I adapted from Ray Berard's novel that I created, wrote and executive produced, called Vegas. It's a crime thriller show, but is actually a show about where we are 200 years after colonisation and why so many young Māori men and women are drawn to the gangs. It's a lot more fun than that sounds. There's gunshots and drug deals gone wrong and people falling in love and people falling out of love. But it's really about that.
That was seamless. So that's Monday, 8:30 on TV.
TV2.
TV2.
Yes.
And what's it called?
Vegas.
Lovely. So that's where your writing's taking you now.
Yeah, and the theme of the raw aftermath of colonisation that we would all like to believe is 200 years ago, it's not. It's living and breathing and infuses everything of how we live today, and we should never forget that, and we should never stop addressing that.
Thank you very much.